El Salvador.
El Salvador.
The country was once
The most dangerous on the planet.
It's one of the safest countries.
There are narratives that transcend the ordinary, stories that define the very fabric of what we accept as reality. El Salvador, once shrouded in the dark cloak of violence and despair, has emerged as a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, to the miraculous interplay of divine providence, human innovation, and a visionary leadership. This documentary unfolds the saga of a nation reborn, not through the might of arms, but through the power of faith, the ingenuity of Bitcoin, and the unyielding resolve of Nayib Bukele.
President Bukele came down essentially like a ton of bricks.
The country is transforming before people's eyes.
People say we dream too much. We're changing how things were done before.
We stand at the threshold of a story where the impossible becomes possible, where a country deemed the most deadly on earth.
I'm sitting there looking at a country that was functionally a failed state and now is poised to be the Singapore of the Western Hemisphere.
El Salvador's journey is not just a narrative of a national comeback. It's a profound psychological inquiry into the nature of change, to the essence of leadership, and to the role that technology has in human salvation. This documentary will not just merely open your eyes, it will recalibrate your perspective on reality. It's a chronicle of miracles, where God, Bitcoin, and Bukele converge to rewrite destiny. We delve into a world where faith moves mountains, where digital currency becomes the cornerstone of economic freedom, and where one man's vision galvanizes a nation to reclaim its spirit, its identity, its future, and most importantly, its sovereignty.
We did it by defying the global elites. We told them no more. In doing so, we did the unthinkable. We transformed El Salvador from the most dangerous country in the world to the safest in the Western Hemisphere.
Through this transformation, El Salvador has become the beacon of hope for the world, illuminating the path to true freedom, the sanctity of private property rights, and the eradication of corruption.
We have been attacking down corruption from the top down. Investigate everybody.
Anyone in your administration, including you?
Yes, of course. Yes, that's the mandate.
This nation now stands as a living testament to what can be achieved when society embraces these ideas. It shows us what liberation from the chains of government overreach and economic manipulation looks like, providing a blueprint for change that resonates with the deepest desires of humanity for justice, autonomy, and integrity.
This can't be the same country. There's no way.
What we're seeing on the ground is nothing short of a miracle. It's a boom country. You can see it in construction that's all over. They're excited to welcome in tourists. They're excited to welcome in foreigners to invest. He's legalized Bitcoin as legal tender, the first in the world, a kind of a revolutionary move.
Nayib Bukele gets in and he turns El Salvador into a first world nation of wealth and prosperity.
And guess what? If it can happen in El Salvador, if turnaround can happen in El Salvador, it certainly can happen for the greatest country that has ever existed in all of humankind.
This is not just the story of El Salvador. It's an anthem to the resilience of the human soul, a testament to the power of belief, and a beacon for those who dare to dream of a better world against all odds.
The example we're going to set up here is going to resonate in all over the world.
But before we dive into the mix, I need to ask you a question.
You have USAID funding nonsense in foreign countries all over the world.
Nayib Bukele says most governments don't want USAID funds flowing into their countries.
El Salvador, what if I told you that USAID wasn't some benevolent fairy fucking godmother, but the economic hitman of El Salvador, a gosh damn plague dressed in humanitarian clothing, with one mission, to infiltrate the country's politics like a cancer spreading through your government until they systemically dismantled El Salvador's sovereignty? Would you believe me? Would you call me a conspiracy theorist?
Why did Bukele say that
nobody wants USAID in our countries? It just destabilizes it. It's designed to divide it.
USAID was trying to regime change it from there. The Soros groups.
I mean, who elected Soros?
These non-governmental organizations are all subsidized by American taxpayer dollars.
America, what if I told you that USAID was the money laundering arm of the CIA, using NGOs as front organizations that act as staffing agencies, building standing armies in third world countries to launder money, recruit, train, and arm individuals for CIA-backed regime change operations?
Is a coup d'etat to overthrow those regimes something we should be considering and planning for Yes, indeed.
These people are lunatics.
USAID has been essentially a shell company being used to funnel billions of dollars.
And their budget is bigger than the State Department and the CIA combined.
They have been funding media outlets. They have been funding revolutions in other countries.
It should be called USCIAID.
When you were working there, how much of the money was just being used to destabilize foreign governments?
I would have been happy to use some of it to destabilize some of the governments that were faced around the world.
It's a playground for the swamp, and Donald Trump is shutting it down.
In the case of El Salvador, relieved that this is happening.
El Salvador, what if I told you that we were in a war to save Christianity, and Bitcoin wasn't just a currency, it was a gosh damn silver bullet aimed at the heart of the bankers' death grip on our sovereignty. These vultures have been bleeding us dry with their satanic extortion operations, sucking the very soul out of humanity by devaluing the wealth of our entire nation.
As a central bank, we have the ability to create money.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed.
We print it digitally.
And there's no end to your ability to do that.
There is no end to our ability to do that.
If most Americans and the rest of the world were to become aware of this farce, confidence in your currency would be lost. The dollar would fall, and the Western civilization with it.
Could Bitcoin be the death of the dollar?
This has the potential to displace the need for banks as a trust institution.
We are witnessing a once-in-a-generation transformation in how people store and transfer wealth and value.
And as you can see, Bitcoin is well above $100,000 right now.
We're talking about El Salvador, the first Bitcoin country.
The Bitcoin system is so perfect. I think it's going to be the future.
Bitcoin is going to save the world, and it starts here in El Salvador.
And this, my friends, this is the story of the great El Salvadorian comeback. If you have followed my journey for a while, you are aware that these projects are entirely self-funded. After releasing What is Treason #Trafficked with J.J. Carroll and initially putting it behind a paywall, I realized that this approach wasn't just un-American, it was counterproductive to our cause. To generate enough public outrage, at least 10 million people need to see these documentaries. That's why I've decided to fund the entire Operation Amber Alert series myself. No partners, no sponsors, no strings attached. But this means I'm 100% reliant on supporters to keep this operation going. At the time of recording this documentary, I am currently at a $5,000 loss on my previous film. People often question why I placed #Traffic behind a paywall. Well, now that you understand, I can't keep producing these films if I'm hemorrhaging thousands of dollars. This means my only income now comes from the $250 I earn monthly on X, and another $1,500 for my memberships on Locals. Every dollar spent is a testament to our collective mission to expose the truth. Imagine if you could, just skipping a cup of coffee. That small sacrifice could be the fuel for our fight for justice. By becoming a paid subscriber on X or Locals, you are not just supporting a cause, you're joining a movement. If we can rally 3,000 hearts to contribute just $5 each a month, together we can release a new documentary every 60 days. You're not just donating, you're becoming a vital part of something much greater than ourselves. You can donate directly at givesendgo.com/RyanMattaFilms, or head over to X at RyanMattaMedia and click the subscribe button to become a monthly supporter. Alternatively, you can click the money icon to see other donation options as well, which include my favorite, Bitcoin. Every little bit helps, and together we can shine a light where the darkness has prevailed for far too long. God bless you. Good morning, El Salvador. We are down here in Bitcoin Beach. Check this out. Fix the money, fix the world. And that's exactly what President Bukele is doing to El Salvador. He fixed their money problem, fixed their crime problem, and he's going to go down in history as one of the greatest presidents the world has ever seen, up at a level with Trump. We got taken over Argentina, we're taking over the United States, we're taking back America. We're gonna make Bitcoin the global reserve currency, and we are gonna fix the world.
Bitcoin changes absolutely everything.
And most people have no idea what the hell it is. So what happens when they figure it out? That's going to really be something.
We could do something centralized, our own currency, whatever. But we're looking into something that's open, free, and most importantly, that it will work.
What Bitcoin offers is a different kind of currency where it's not backed by a government, it's backed by math. And so you don't have to trust the government.
This is going to be huge. Huge for us.
There is a kind of revolution of freedom happening in El Salvador.
So you say El Salvador, through Bitcoin, is now achieving the American dream.
The Salvadoran dream is alive and well because we've got economic freedom here, we've got freedom of speech here.
I think El Salvador has become like the safest country in Central and South America. What they've done is completely like revolutionize the country.
You cannot have prosperity without peace. You can't have booming economies if people are afraid to go outside.
These people feel like they got their lives back.
Before we delve into the narrative of El Salvador's remarkable resurgence, let's embark on a grim expedition back to January of 1962, the inception of U.S. aid in El Salvador.
The United States is the world's largest giver in the world by far of foreign aid.
Aid, the concept of foreign assistance, is not a popular program in the United States.
It almost always ends in bloodshed, in regime change.
U.S. aid is the toxic arm of America's imperialism. For 60 years, U.S. aid has masqueraded as a development agency in El Salvador. But let's call it what it truly is, a Trojan horse for the CIA and the military-industrial complex. This isn't about aid, it's about control, subjugation, and keeping El Salvador in a chokehold of dependency.
El Salvador's financial dependence on the Americans is growing. The country is almost bankrupt. The Americans are offering the aid.
Clearly marked food supplies, labeled a gift to the American people.
The timeline of hell kicked off the sham in January of 1962, when U.S. aid was first established in El Salvador. Almost instantly, the economic chains were shackled and the political puppets were installed. This continued from the 1960s to the 1980s, turning the economy into shambles. They didn't give a damn about helping El Salvador. They just wanted to keep its economy dependent on the U.S., ensuring that the country's wealth flowed into the pockets of these unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., instead of uplifting the citizens of El Salvador.
El Salvador has also become the testing ground for U.S. policy in Central America.
The people of Central America want democracy and freedom. They want and hope for a better future.
Each day, El Salvador comes closer to civil war.
The Reagan administration in America has decided to upgrade its military aid to El Salvador.
We've provided just enough aid to avoid outright disaster, but not enough to resolve the crisis.
That's what the Reagan administration wants from Congress. More money for aid.
Much more aid is needed.
And more arms to fight communism.
Some people think our administration may be exaggerating the threat we face. So El Salvador is being left to slowly bleed to death.
The Reagan administration, they basically created new structures to do what used to be done by the CIA, to be done by places like USAID and their newly created 1983 National Endowment for Democracy.
The launching of a program with a vision and a noble purpose. The National Endowment for Democracy
is effectively the operations arm of much of USAID work.
USAID propped up right-wing dictators and turned a blind eye to their atrocities. They weren't pushing democracy, they were pushing U.S. homogeny, ensuring El Salvador remained a compliant pawn in the Cold War chess game. It only took roughly $1 billion in aid from the United States, and within 18 years, USAID achieved its goal. The Civil War had started.
What was going on there was the slaughter of the innocents. Anyone against U.S. foreign policy, they were labeled subversive, el enemigo, the enemy.
¿Por qué tanta violencia? Why is there so much violence in El Salvador? Perhaps violence is the only alternative to the subversives.
The Salvadoran military were out of control. I mean, they would kill anybody.
This wasn't just any civil war either. It was a bloodbath that lasted from 1980 to 1992, and USAID was front and center, fueling the fire.
Now, during the 1980s, El Salvador was the largest recipient of U.S. aid in Latin America. In fact, it was only third to Israel and Egypt, worldwide that is.
This has to include assistance to the military and the death squads in El Salvador.
Which, by the way, was the most intense of these narco right-wing, death squads during the Cold War.
We're giving them the helicopters to move. We're giving them the M16s to equip the troops, the trucks to move the people, and the training.
Now, the U.S. provided more than $4 billion to El Salvador from 1980 to 1990. Out of that, more than half was in military aid.
USAID was more than happy to fund the El Salvadorian military, who was notorious for their human rights abuses. They didn't give a shit about peace or justice. They were arming the war machine to keep communism at bay, even if it meant slaughtering thousands.
The violence in El Salvador has become as common as breathing. The people here live in fear and uncertainty.
Death squads are believed to be responsible for more than half of the political murders committed.
The Army here operates with a list system. If your name happens to be on it, you can expect to live for 24 hours.
They go out and they murder anyone who is a potential student leader, human rights activist.
It is reported today from El Salvador that 4 Americans have been killed there.
This was the first time that Americans seem to have been singled out by a death squad.
Today, the targets included the Roman Catholic Church, 6 Jesuit priests brutally murdered.
But El Salvador continues to be plagued by human rights abuses, the kind of violence that turns the stomach.
Stop the repression! Look at this guy. Look at this fella. What's your position? Stop the repression in El Salvador! Our tax dollars are killing priests! Let me just say a word about El Salvador. Maybe it'll help.
Why are we killing priests in El Salvador?
The answer is we're not. Now you be quiet, and here's the answer to your question.
Communist subversion.
The new president justifies this action by pointing to communist interference. El Salvador is viewed as a test of his administration's will to halt Soviet subversion.
If the communists can start war against the people of El Salvador, then El Salvador and its friends are surely justified in defending themselves by blocking the flow of arms.
In the 1980s, the buzzword was communism. Today, the buzzword is nationalism. The buzzword is irrelevant. There will always be an existential threat, and the only one who can save us from this fake crisis is the U.S. government.
What we are watching is a 4-phased operation. Phase 1 has been completed, the seizure of Nicaragua. Next is El Salvador, to be followed by Honduras and Guatemala. It's clear and explicit for the ultimate takeover of Central America.
They create the manufactured crisis, which then creates the environment that allows them to distract you from the fact that they are ignoring the true issue.
The causes of the problems in El Salvador and Central America, Guatemala, and previously in Nicaragua, you're right, it's not communism, it's not Cuba, it's not the Soviet Union, it's not Nicaragua. The causes of the insurrections, the revolutions, are decades, generations of bitter poverty and extreme repression.
All the citizens wanted was for their private property rights to be protected and for a free and fair justice system to be created. But guess what? They completely dodged the bullet on land reform and social justice.
I mean, on the land reform was never as great as it was touted to be.
Why, you may ask? Well, because a truly stable El Salvador wouldn't need any U.S. intervention, so they did what the U.S. does best.
More and more Salvadoran troops are carrying US M16s at this point. And if you talk to a peasant, they are likely to point up to a helicopter and say, that helicopter came from the United States. Why is it bombing us?
And they perpetrated a cycle of violence because, well, it served their narrative.
What they did was make up a fictitious link with Cuba and the Soviet Union. And in the Kissinger report, the famous Kissinger report of 1984, it said that authentic revolution, it does not constitute a threat to the United States.
I have to say that I'm very skeptical about the willingness of the administration to be open and honest with itself and with the American people about the true source of the violence in El Salvador. I think we're isolating ourselves internationally. I think we're being arrogant. I think we're acting in a way that is unworthy of the best traditions of our own country. And I think we're just plain wrong.
The El Salvadorian Civil War, spanning from 1980 to 1992, resulted in a significant number of deaths. According to various sources, the United Nations being one of them, their report stated that they killed more than 75,000 people, with approximately 8,000 people who just disappeared.
These were victims of shadowy death squads, generally believed to have ties with extreme rightists in the police and armed forces.
In the end, more than 75,000 Salvadorans were killed, and there was no quick victory.
A whole generation was wiped out. The productive capacity of El Salvador was terribly damaged. It was simply a case where our reaction lacked all proportionality.
And I think we're a very moral country. And I say that positively, not in any self-righteousness or whatever. And I think the American people simply would not have supported. The American people would have been outraged if they'd have known what was going on down there. If they knew the extent of the brutality of the Salvadoran army, an army that we were spending hundreds of millions of dollars on, I think the American people would have said no.
signing of the Chapultepec Peace Accords was the accumulation of these factors, effectively ending the conflict that have ravaged El Salvador for over a decade, with the official end to the hostilities set for February 1st of 1992. But, of course, USAID being the tyrannical tyrants that they weren't going to let some lousy peace accord get in the way of their business. This kicked off what I like to call the post-war decay of El Salvador, which lasted from 1992 to roughly 2010. USAID, being the wolf in sheep's clothing, concocted what history refers to as the deportation disaster, which instantly fueled the explosion of gangs in El Salvador. Thanks to United States policies passed down by the State Department and supported by USAID, gang members belonging to gangs like MS-13 were dumped back into El Salvador, turning it into a powder keg.
How did MS-13 start?
So MS-13 is not new. It's been around since the 80s, and it was actually founded here in the US, in Los Angeles.
MS-13 was not an El Salvadorian gang that invaded the United States so much it was as a feature of the US prison system.
People fleeing civil war in El Salvador came to Los Angeles, and sort of for protection, they formed this gang.
There to protect themselves from American gang violence, young Salvadorans formed MS-13.
The federal government has also been cracking down, deporting gang members convicted of crimes.
We will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes.
And when Bill Clinton decided to deport those guys, he didn't tell our government at the time, I'm deporting this criminal. They just, send them here.
This government video shows some of the arrestees getting on a plane, being deported, in this case, back to El Salvador, and leaving the plane free of handcuffs and leg chains.
And they came, there were few, but unchecked. At the same time, some laws were passed to protect minors from imprisonment. And of course, the gangs used that to recruit 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds.
In El Salvador, it's believed there are now some 20,000 young Salvadorans who have become gang members. The gangs just keep on growing.
But they grew, and they started controlling territories. A few years later, they were actually a huge international criminal organization that they had bases in Italy, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, the US.
MS-13 has the potential to be
the fastest growing gang.
It's a fact. MS-13 is the fastest growing gang in the United States.
The gang has committed 27 murders.
Another suspected MS-13 gang member
accused of killing a 15-year-old boy in Maryland. The child was found dismembered.
Machetes?
That's their favorite weapon of choice.
And these gangs are now operating in nearly every corner of America.
You're starting to see the pattern in America? They create the chaos, and of course, they are the ones with the solution that never works. It's almost like we just witnessed that in America. Violent gang members, drug dealers, and rapists being imported into our country, and our country turned into what?
The worst border crisis. An invasion.
The biggest child smuggling and trafficking operation.
Migrant crime is beginning to spiral out of control.
What types of crimes are we talking about?
Murderers, rapists, be gang members, or terrorists.
Where did the system break down?
This is an emergency. Where is the DHS secretary?
Oh, a powder keg. Yeah, it does sound familiar, doesn't it?
If you think the violence of gangsters is remarkable in the United States, this is child's play compared to what they do in these countries.
There's death all around us, so we're used to this.
This place is a brisk, efficient processing center for human misery. One technician tells us they see an infinity of death.
So how culpable is the U.S. in the spread of gang violence, not just in El Salvador, but Guatemala and Honduras, because of these deportations of violence they've learned in the U.S.?
The way I look at it is that it's dynamic. Both the United States and the Central American countries need to be part of resolving this and solving it.
Guess what USAID's response to the explosion of gangs was in El Salvador? Oh, their solution was to create a half-assed youth program that did nothing to stem the tide of violence because, they were never meant to.
We built a program, USAID actually administers it in El Salvador. These programs that we've seen in Los Angeles, we brought them to El Salvador. They're like a youth center where we actually take kids out of the streets. We give vocational programs.
It was always about maintaining the appearance. While the fucking vultures at USAID and these NGOs were stuffing their pockets, getting obscenely rich off the backs of aid money, funneled through a web of kickbacks and corruption.
I will admit, I have an opinion going into this process that we have contracted out too much of the core mission of USAID. Too much of the money stays right here in Washington.
USAID is well prepared to implement the new strategy, and we are committed to efficient, effective, and transparent oversight of our programs. Already, we are seeing results of our crime prevention activities in El Salvador.
Crime prevention? What crime prevention?
Where our initial analysis points to a 66% drop in homicides in the 76 communities where USAID targets its programming.
The programs were superficial bullshit, designed to look good on paper, while gangs took over entire neighborhoods. They didn't fix shit. They just ensured El Salvador remained a chaotic mess, justifying further U.S. intervention.
Every single thing USAID does is dual purpose. It's dual purpose by charter. They're only allowed to do the things that advance U.S. foreign policy. And we just put a little bow on top of it and we say, in the process, we're making the world a better place.
USAID is a black ops bank account. That's what it is.
And it was really about control and money. It had nothing to do with helping people, making people better, giving aid to foreign countries. That's all a cloak and dagger bullshit show. The reality was it's about money.
Yeah, it's
money and
always
influence.
It's always about power and limited resources.
Yeah.
This is how the history book should remember USAID's true legacy. USAID is a tool of oppression. USAID isn't about development. It's a gosh damn sham. It's about keeping a chokehold on countries like El Salvador, making sure that they are nothing more than pawns to the US's imperial whims.
It's actually trying to exploit the divisions in other countries, to distract those other countries, to tear down traditional societies, to hurt the church.
This shit show serves the Satanists running the CIA, the bloodthirsty military-industrial complex, and whatever twisted satanic agenda that they're pushing down our throats.
In the CIA, we didn't give a hoot about democracy. I mean, it was fine if a government was elected and would cooperate with us, but if it didn't, then democracy didn't mean a thing to us.
You know, the U.S. worked with Noriega. The U.S. worked with Saddam Hussein. The U.S. worked with the bin Laden family. It's not really about the ideology, left or right. There's no such thing as an extremist group in that sense. It's, are you useful or not?
Nowadays, instead of having just the CIA going around behind the scenes and trying to manipulate the process secretly by inserting money here and instructions there and so forth, they have now a sidekick.
A former CIA officer. In 1975, he published Inside the Company, revealing that USAID was being used as CIA cover across Latin America, from Ecuador to Mexico.
So basically, USAID is a proxy arm for CIA, Department of State, the Bureau, DHS, all these type intelligence organizations.
I always say, when it's too dirty for the CIA, you give it to USAID, is because the CIA needs to get presidential approval for every covert action they do. There needs to be a presidential finding that they need to do it. USAID does not.
The evidence is clear. USAID is not a helper, but a hindrance, a toxic force that has done more to serve U.S. imperialism than to aid El Salvador. They are not here to help, they're here to control, and they've done it under the guise of aid for far too long.
In El Salvador, Nayib Bukele,
a businessman and the former mayor of this capital.
He says he's secured the majority of votes.
Become the next president of El Salvador.
He's only 37 years old.
Nayib Armando Bukele Ortiz.
He campaign as an anti-corruption outsider that will bring to an end a two-party system that has been in power for 3 decades.
El Salvador, como lo conocemos, es un país que ha sufrido mucho. Es un país que nos ha tocado reconstruirlo. Es un país que ha enfrentado terremotos. Es un país que ha enfrentado gobiernos corruptos.
When Bukele assumed the presidency in El Salvador was at a crossroads, a nation grappling with a spectacle of gang violence, economic stagnation, and political disillusionment. Yet, within this crucible of change, Bukele saw not just a problem, but an opportunity.
Fuera bueno que invirtieran en organizaciones de verdad y no organizaciones básicamente de la oposición, pero al final de cuentas, pues mientras sean ONGs que hagan un trabajo por el país, pues en teoría debe ser bueno.
President Bukele of El Salvador has made several public statements regarding the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. particularly in the relation to their funding decisions.
The United States Agency for International Development, USAID, decided to redirect the funds it provided to public institutions to civil society organizations. This is the response from the President of the Republic, Nayib Bukele.
Son bienvenidos todos los apoyos de Estados Unidos o de cualquier otro país, pero ya debemos de empezar a ver hacia un país autosuficiente y no un país que esté viviendo de regalado. Así que donde quieran regalar su dinero, pues pueden hacerlo mientras no sea financiando movimientos políticos de la oposición, porque pues eso es ilegal, pero sí pueden.
And this is exactly when USAID declared war on Bukele.
They do not have a commitment to accountability, to transparency.
The rule of law be respected, that the division of powers be respected.
Even the issue of international cooperation will impose on this side from the United States, but another country could also impose, is to meet those minimum principles that obviously are not being met.
Right. Oftentimes, USAID institutions are forced into their country or forced into different regions in their country as part of a compliance measure that the State Department is imposing. You need to have a certain level of human rights monitoring, or your energy development has to be this consistent with climate change, or else we're going to destroy you with our trade relations, or we're going to put sanctions on you unless you put our humanitarian aid organs in there.
The corrupt system work in tandem with the so-called international community, the NGOs, and of course the fake news. They work in conjunction. They run some stories and publish them, same pictures to reinforce their agendas. You're no strangers to that here in the United States. We deal with that in El Salvador too.
And the media in the United States attacked him.
Look, President Bukele,
the current president who calls himself the world's coolest dictator,
tyrants, dictators, autocrats of the world.
They called him authoritarian, they called him a despot.
He seized control of the federal judiciary.
He even altered El Salvador's constitution to allow himself a second term.
It's the will of the people. Isn't that the essence of democracy?
No, he isn't. He's a dictator, and he surrounded himself with oligarchs, and that's what they do, and that's what you'll see everywhere when a strong man comes into power.
That is the free press that they talk about? Please.
So let's talk about USAID's strategic playbook, shall we? And let's talk about how they topple democratically elected leaders. This is the exact methods that you'll see used by the CIA, USAID, and the United States State Department, and as well as our military. Strategy number 1, redirecting funds to NGOs. USAID, in an attempt to bypass Bukele's administration, redirected aids from the government institutions to non-governmental organizations, also known as NGOs, and civil society groups. This was under the guise of promoting transparency and reducing corruption, but it also was a way to influence local politics by supporting entities that might not align with Bukele's policies. This move was particularly highlighted after concerns were raised about a judicial purge and the Attorney General's office being replaced by Bukele's allies.
We changed the Attorney General. We got so much condemnation because we changed the Attorney General that we need to change to prosecute it,
And this relationship with prosecutors in USAID runs very deep. USAID paid $27 million in just 2 grants alone to the Tide Center, which is the group that manages the Soros prosecutors.
Leftist billionaires, organizations, they all donate to Tide specifically so their money can go dark.
And tells them who to prosecute, who not to prosecute, has them sign pledges. They do this everywhere, and they can get away with it because judicial reform and anti-corruption is part of our humanitarian aid work. We're trying to strengthen their democracy.
They try to block every step of what we were doing.
Strategy number 2, supporting opposition through aid. By funding NGOs, USAID could indirectly support opposition voices, politically stirring up dissent against Bukele's hardline security measures and economic policies. This was seen as an attempt to create and/or amplify narratives critical of Bukele's governance, especially regarding human rights and democratic practices.
So, like, what they'll do is they want to create unrest in a country, they'll go and give billions of dollars to maybe some unions, or they'll give billions of dollars to whatever, some groups. They'll invent the groups.
It makes them all hate each other and fight each other and distract them so the United States can come in and exploit those divisions.
And then they'll
kind of what they did here
with
BLM. Kind of the same thing that they do to the other countries.
Yeah.
That's what they did to you.
That's right.
They're going to keep doing it.
Now, maybe we didn't mind USAID before. Sure, they toppled governments overseas, but that wouldn't happen here.
Strategy number 3, Political pressure and propaganda. USAID's rhetoric often included buzzwords like those that we talked about earlier, when they made public statements about democracy and human rights, which were inherently wrong, and they were used to pressure Bukele. The agency criticized Bukele's methods of government, like his state of emergency and the mass incarceration of gang members. You know, the ones with the teardrop tattoos and MS-13 gang members all over their face? Yeah, those gang members.
An actual satanic gang that rapes children. We're talking about MS-13, an explicitly satanic gang. We're arresting these guys with face tattoos who look like demons. We're arresting them, we're throwing them in prison. Why are you upset about that?
Cries of humanitarian rights violations, authoritarian crackdowns. See, now we prove they're authoritarian because they've done this. And that's where the international community comes into the picture, with joint sanctions, economic pressure. Now they can hold up this crackdown as the reason to do it.
Strategy number 4, economic leverage. USAID, they've historically used aid as leverage. By controlling the flow of aid, they could influence economic policies, or at least the perception of economic success or failure under Bukele.
They're telling the countries that they're giving aid to do the wrong things, to do socialist policies.
There are NGOs, international agencies, governments that push these policies on weaker countries.
Yes, they are pushing it very hard.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you resist that?
By publicly resisting it. I mean,
publicly resist.
Yes, I mean they will try to push their agendas in our country as well, like every other country. And since we are a small, poor, relatively poor country, of course they can, their money is worth more, so they can, they can hire people, they can.
Strategy number 5, interference in local governance. They like to call them allegations, we like to call them facts. Like the fact that USAID was involved and supported movements that questioned Bukele's legality to run for re-election, thereby attempting to destabilize his political position. This is exactly when it became evident that USAID commented on and supported initiatives that were aimed at reinforcing democratic checks and balances, which we all know they were using those to critique Bukele's consolidation of power, which he needed to obviously remove these gangs from power.
Why did Bukele say that basically was the first one on X to say that, yeah, USAID is awful, it's got to go, countries don't want it, look at my case? Because USAID was trying to regime change him from there. The Soros groups, I mean, they all said that his attempts to clean up the drug trade were, humanitarian violations of the rights of drug cartels.
Strategy number 6, funding projects that oppress Bukele's vision. You want to know what they funded? They funded projects aimed at gender equality, crime prevention, and youth engagement, none of which were beneficial.
One of them was for Central American Gender Assessment Consultant Services.
This is literal indoctrination. This is globalism. These countries don't need to learn how to do gender reconstructive surgery for children. That can just be a very small sect of people in California. We don't need to try to teach sex ed in foreign countries. That's just not our responsibility whatsoever. So
we're paying a guy in El Salvador to assess gender.
The Russians will come to your country and they will say, we'll give you security. The Chinese will come to your country and they'll say, we'll give you money. And then the United States will come to your country and say, we're going to give you drag queen story time in your public library unless you work with us. And that's not attractive. So people like President Bukele say, yeah, I don't know if I want to work with these guys.
Strategy number 7, which is also key, surveillance and information gathering. While not directly mentioned in the context given, USAID's involvement often comes with a side of information gathering, which could be used to create reports or influence international perceptions of Bukele's government, potentially for political gain.
And USAID has been in the process of taking over so-called independent investigative journalism around the world, and at the same time then training NGOs how to demand censorship, for example.
If Bukele had not done the radical reforms that he had, the internet would have been completely censored by USAID and the State Department in order to rig hearts and minds against him, because they would want to stop him from cleaning out these drug gangs. He would stop him from cleaning up the crime.
Strategy number 8, their response to funding. When USAID announced that they would reorient their resources towards civil society rather than directly to the El Salvadorian government, Bukele responded by asserting that the El Salvadorian people would not receive a cent from USAID under such circumstances. This statement reflects his stance against what he perceived as interference in domestic affairs.
Where does this mentality come from that they have this right to pursue their own agenda independent of any elected officials or elected parts of the government?
The entire agency exists
as a carefully constructed lie. There's no USAID project on God's green earth that is honest. If we are irrigating the agricultural fields in a country, it's because we're trying to control the territory there. If we are helping them write their constitution and go through democratic legal reform, it's so that we can control their laws.
Strategy number 9, sovereignty and funding. Bukele had made it clear that he does not see a need to negotiate or ask USAID to redirect their funds back to the government programs, emphasizing that USAID money belongs to the US taxpayer and not to El Salvadorian's government.
No vamos a buscar reorientación. El dinero de AID no es un dinero nuestro, un dinero de los Estados Unidos, de los que pagan impuestos en Estados Unidos, y nosotros no tenemos por qué decirles a dónde lo tienen que invertir.
Bukele, he's a strong critic of aid in a lot of ways. In the past, these nations have defined their relationships with the United States and other hegemons through the distribution of foreign aid.
And last but not least, we're going to see the ingenuity and cleverness of President Bukele. Strategy number 10, allegations of supporting communist movements. Bukele had claimed that USAID was using US taxpayer money to fund communist movements against his democratically elected government, which, he argued, has high approval ratings. This reflects a narrative of foreign interference aimed at destabilizing his administration. These statements by Bukele illustrate a critical stance towards USAID, highlighting concerns over foreign influence, aid allocation, and the political dimensions of international assistance. And he couldn't be more accurate.
At best, maybe 10% of USAID money reaches real projects that actually help people in need. There are such cases, but the rest is used to fuel dissent, finance protests, and undermine administrations that refuse to align with the globalist agenda.
USAID staff do what the political appointees tell them to do.
Well, okay.
They don't initiate these things.
They don't.
Oh.
So that means that all these directives came from the White House.
The White House, yes, and the State Department.
So that, okay.
And I also heard from President Bukele sharp criticisms of the U.S. State Department.
The Biden administration were quite publicly calling on him to respect the Constitution, to respect human rights.
Since taking office, President Biden has refused to meet President Bukele. Secretary of State Tony Blinken has criticized him, and the administration has significantly reduced foreign assistance to his government. One must ask why.
Because he threatens all of their narratives, that he threatens all of the propaganda that they've been pushing, that you can't have a strong man, you can't have any strong leadership, you can't have a country that's putting their national interest first, you can't actually solve crime in an effective way. All of these are just the things we have to accept as part of living in modern society, yada, 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 yada. It's all this sort of, weaponized nihilism that they push out on the airwaves here in the United States.
Cutting this so-called aid isn't just beneficial for the United States, it's also a big win for the rest of the world.
So, I guess the problem that I have with USAID and with the State Department and with CIA and with all of the ways that we project power abroad is not that they exist, it's that they're not serving us and they're not serving sort of like the basic goals you would want for any great power, which is like peace, security, sort of continuity, reasonableness, freedom, democracy. Like, they're not doing any of that. They're like,
from funding the Wuhan lab to growing heroin in Afghanistan and irrigating the poppy fields to setting up fake Twitter in Cuba with an explicit USAID document saying that the plan is to, once we have enough people, switch to get them to hate their government and topple their government and take to the streets in smart riots.
The goal is regime change.
Why would we put that mission in USAID?
Perhaps most shockingly, the Cuban Twitter program was not paid for and run by a spy agency such as the CIA. Instead, it was the brainchild of USAID.
USAID perhaps is the new CIA.
Given that USAID is CIA, there is no daylight between those two organizations.
Former USAID Director John Gilligan once admitted the agency was infiltrated from top to bottom with CIA people. So the director of USAID said it was top to bottom, it's a CIA operation.
The worst scandals in American statecraft in the 1960s and 70s and maybe early 80s were the CIA. In recent years, the worst scandals in American statecraft have been USAID.
The idea was to plant operatives in every kind of activity we had overseas. Government, volunteer, religious, every kind of operation.
Oh, and at home. And at home.
And at home.
These agencies, they are not accountable. They are run by unelected bureaucrats. There's all this misplaced outrage about Elon Musk being unelected. Yeah, but at least he's reporting to a duly elected president.
The USAID is really corrupt. I'll tell you, it's corrupt. It's incompetent, and it's really corrupt.
There was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
Now that you understand how the game is played, I hope you can understand the Goliath that Bukele truly faced. Bukele stepped into the arena when the odds weren't just against him, they were designed to crush him. The US government, through its various arms, had a chokehold on El Salvador's political, judicial, and economic levers. The one thing they couldn't account for was God and his divine mission for President Bukele.
Bukele first came into power in 2019, and for nearly 2 years, he's overseen a vast and brutal crackdown on gangs.
We did the unthinkable to cleanse our society.
After the country's president declared a state of emergency to crack down on violent gangs.
And it was a huge clampdown. Some 75,000 people have been arrested.
Crime is down dramatically. Homicides, in particular, have plummeted. They have a lower murder rate than we do.
Now El Salvador rivals Canada for one of the safest places in the Americas.
El Salvador went from the murder capital of the world to one of the safest countries.
Other countries have looked to emulate his model.
The president's vast and brutal crackdown on cartels and gangs has earned him admiration from many, including President Trump.
I have great respect for him. I know him. He's very tough on crime.
El Salvador, que por tantos años fue de las pandillas, al fin es nuestro.
President Nayib Bukele has been sworn in for a second term.
Bukele was re-elected in a landslide.
The single most popular democratically elected president of any country in the world.
And so is the president the most popular man in the world in El Salvador?
El Salvador has undergone a transformation unlike any other nation in the Western Hemisphere, possibly the world.
Now that we talked about how it got started, let's talk about how it's going. And let's talk about President Bukele's top accomplishments. Number 1, the unprecedented reduction in the homicide rate. Bukele's administration had implemented a strategic crackdown on gang violence, notably through a statement of emergency that began in March of 2022, when 62 Salvadorians were brutally murdered within just 24 hours.
Tonight, El Salvador is under state of emergency after a deadly weekend of gang violence.
The National Civil Police reporting 62 homicides on Saturday alone.
14 people murdered on Friday and 62 the following day, making Saturday one of the deadliest days in 30 years.
Basically, they killed 87 people in 3 days, which for a country of 6 million people, it's crazy. It would be the equivalent of having 5,000 murders in the US in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
The crackdown on gangs intensifies in El Salvador.
Se metieron con el gobierno y con el presidente equivocado. The government surged troops throughout the country, overwhelming the gangs and arresting and imprisoning its members. One active gang member told reporters, quote, "There were too many soldiers everywhere all at once." Bukele is going after the thugs and criminals. He has thrown 70,000 people in prison so that the other 6 million people could be free and prosperous and ascendant.
He won a couple years ago and was super chill for like the first year. He didn't do anything that dramatic. And then he very quietly started to make the connections in the police force, and then like overnight he just flipped a switch and just started raiding entire parts of the country.
And we were able to do it with no civilian casualties. After we started the war on gangs, we had no civilian casualties, and we basically eradicated all crime.
This approach led to a substantial decrease in the homicide rate. There were only 114 homicides recorded during the year of 2024. Now this number includes all homicides. I've scored every corner of the news landscape, and not a single article documents a gang-related murder in El Salvador throughout the entire year of 2024.
Now his administration has seen significant reductions in crime, with many citizens simply saying they feel more secure than ever.
This whole week, we have seen his supporters praise these efforts to curb violence in their country, something that they have been concerned about for years.
But his hardline approach has drawn sharp criticism from human rights advocates who warn that his tactics may violate civil liberties and undermine democratic institutions.
Now, unfortunately, the innocent Salvadorians who were inadvertently caught in this dragnet are collateral damage that many are willing to accept in this fight against such a pervasive violence.
And a lot of them were human rights organizations. And you would ask, but what about the human right of a woman not to be raped? And what about the human right to live? Or the human right to walk in the street? But no, they were worried about the human rights of the killers, which, they have human rights. I don't say they don't, they're humans. But if you have to prioritize, what will you prioritize?
Yes.
Right?
Their president rounded up all the gang members, threw them in a high-security lockdown. Nobody's ever escaped this prison.
In a message to the international community this week, President Bukele tweeting that no countries have helped El Salvador in the war against gangs, adding, quote, "Do not come later and try to tell us what we should have done or not do."
The president has gone as far as asking the human rights groups to come to El Salvador and take the gang members out of the country to a place where he says they can look after their human rights, so you can see the stance that's being taken by the president, standing firm by his decisions.
Murder capital of the world is a tragic title to hold. Getting rid of that was the bare minimum we had to achieve in order to even start thinking about rebuilding our country.
You'd think that would be greeted in the hemisphere as this amazing thing, like what's going on in El Salvador, and instead there's been this, what's going on in El Salvador?
Yeah.
There's been hostility.
Yes.
Do you think that's why?
I think they're afraid of the example, because a lot of people might say, hey, we want that too. If they can do it with no money, with very few resources.
President Bukele transformed El Salvador from a nation plagued by 62 gang murders in a single day to one where not a single gang-related murder was reported over an entire year. This isn't just progress, it's a monumental victory against the tide of gang violence that once threatened to drown the entire nation. Number 2, Bukele's war on corruption.
La corrupción afecta todas las áreas de la vida. Un país no puede funcionar si hay corrupción. Así que mi tercer y último anuncio, el más importante de los tres que daré esta noche, es que hoy declaramos la guerra contra la corrupción.
As Bukele declared war on corruption in politics, there have been significant government restructuring, including the removal and arrest of several government officials from past administrations, including former presidents, ministers, and other high-ranking officials.
They'll be able to look anywhere and at anyone in the country, in previous administrations, people who led them, your administration, anyone in your administration, including you.
Yes, of course. Yes, that's the mandate.
A big part of his success was not just taking on the gangs, but was taking on the corrupt political class that ruled El Salvador for decades, and in many cases was propped up by the United States and other, foreign interests. There's a lot of parallels there to what we're seeing in the United States and the broader Western world. So
Bukele's administration sacked 5 of the 15 Supreme Court judges in 2021, because they were corrupt. They were protecting their masters at the State Department, not the Constitution of El Salvador.
Going after the courts in order to nullify elections or influence the activities of the elections is the beating heart of what USAID and, to a related extent, the State Department, CIA, and civil military folks at DoD do, because it undermines the efficacy of democratic institutions, US-backed NGOs and civil society institutions in the area.
Who elected them? They don't have a democratic mandate. If they want a seat in the table, they should run for office.
And everything that we do, Supreme Court, is unconstitutional. So we went to the people and said, we cannot work like this. We need a majority in Congress. We need a huge majority in Congress, because we not only need to approve laws, we need to get all these people out. And the only way to get it out democratically and respecting the rules of the system is that if we get a huge, immense majority in Congress, right? People gave us the huge majority.
And just like clockwork, USAID used their propaganda puppets in the mainstream media to attack Bukele, claiming that Bukele was trying to remove anyone who questioned his dictatorship. Nayib Bukele fires 5 Supreme Court judges and Attorney General. Political clash erupts in El Salvador as Congress votes out judges. Nayib Bukele's authoritarian appeal. U.S. is concerned by the direction President Bukele is taking El Salvador.
That's also a narrative that they want to produce.
But you stayed within the rules the whole time.
We have never not respected a single rule. They cannot point out a single thing that was done by not respecting the rules that were written by them.
Well, what's going on right now with our federal government and our State Department, and USAID, and these globalist NGOs is just absolute criminal malpractice. You have a budding country like El Salvador that we could be incredible allies with. And instead of reaching out to them and working with them, we're treating them standoffishly, criticizing how Bukele goes about the day-to-day governance that is very much up to him, in my opinion.
On April 29th of 2024, Bukele publicly ordered an investigation into his entire cabinet, including himself for corruption. This was a direct order from President Bukele to look into corruption within his administration, leading to the conviction and arrest of various officials, including those from Bukele's own party, New Ideas.
And indeed, they found a rat in the woodpile. Somebody that was going to be in the cabinet was compromised, and so they were able to excise that and deal with that.
That's a big deal for him to say. So he is asking the Attorney General of El Salvador, investigate everybody in my administration, everybody in the executive branch.
And any people from his own party that take money from citizens. So it's not that he's loyal to his party and nobody else, and he doesn't care what they're doing. He does not stand for corruption.
Number 3, Bitcoin is legal tender.
I will send to Congress a bill that will make Bitcoin a legal tender in El Salvador.
Queda aprobada la ley de Bitcoin.
In June of 2021, President Bukele made El Salvador the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, this move was aimed at fostering economic development, attracting foreign investment, and reducing the cost of remittance for El Salvadorians abroad. Now, despite international warnings, this has been seen as a huge landmark policy in Bitcoin adoption.
The situation in El Salvador is instructive.
The primary currency in El Salvador is the US dollar, so there was no central bank. They don't have the ability to issue their own money.
They had a war, a civil war, and following the civil war, their currency collapsed, and so they dollarized. Their problem was the traditional 20th century banking system is too expensive and cumbersome to serve the people of El Salvador.
70% of people in El Salvador don't have access to bank accounts. So for them, the concept of having a savings account is almost foreign.
In less than 1 month from the day that it started, which was September 7th or Bitcoin Day, over 50% of the population of the country had downloaded a Bitcoin wallet. So it's exceeded my wildest expectations.
So they accomplished more in 3 weeks with digital assets than they accomplished in 300 years with physical assets.
President Bukele, acting as a visionary prophet, has harnessed this celestial currency, making it legal tender and thereby ushering in a new era where every El Salvadorian can claim true ownership over their wealth.
There are $6 billion of remittances that go from the United States to people in El Salvador. So
it's a country where over 20% of the GDP is inbound remittance. It's how capital is influx into the economy. However, of that GDP, fees can be upwards to 50%.
the big push by the president down there was to take some of the fees that are paid on those remittances and put them in the pocket of the people down in El Salvador to the tune of about $500 million.
It's a good thing for our country, receiving remittances at the speed of light and having almost no costs like you would have with Western Union and those types of systems.
The IMF basically said, don't do this.
What are the risks of this project for you? Because
what could be the risks? Yeah, you could get some people angry or mad at us.
The International Monetary Fund has urged El Salvador to reverse course on Bitcoin. In response, Bukele tweeted, "We are not your colony, your backyard, or your front yard. Stay out of our internal affairs."
They haven't been so good to us anyway. It's not like we're doing good in the old system, so why not try a new system that, for me, it looks bulletproof.
With Bitcoin as our reserve currency, President Bukele has cut off the umbilical cord of dependency on a system that thrives on inflation, devaluation, and centralized control.
Our Fed policy affects the entire world, every country in the
world.
Definitely. But it affects El Salvador directly and immediately in the same way it affects us because you trade in the US dollar.
Yes, a little worse, because we do get all the devaluation and we get all the inflation, but we get none of the spending. So,
you can't print it.
We can't print it. Yeah, you can print the US dollars.
Fair, good point.
Central banks around the world differ on many issues, whether they're for negative interest rates or not, but one thing they don't differ on is their thirst for power. They love the power that they have, and they're very reluctant to give it up, and frankly, I think they're afraid of cryptos.
For far too long, the power to manipulate a nation's currency has been a tool in the hands of a few, used to control, to oppress, to line the pockets at the expense of the many. Bitcoin's fixed supply introduces a philosophical imperative that contrasts sharply with the inflationary tendencies of fiat currency.
There is a huge risk of currency debasement when the government is in control, and particularly when you have the world's reserve currency. There's just such an enormous temptation to print money to finance your budget and to rack up loans.
In a world where value can be expanded by the will of those in power, Bitcoin stands as a beacon of scarcity, embodying the principles that value should be earned, not arbitrarily created. For El Salvadorians, this means a future where the fruits of their labor are not diluted by the whims of policy, but are protected by the laws of mathematics.
Now, what Bitcoin offers is a different kind of currency where it's not backed by a government, it's backed by math, backed by encryption. And so you don't have to trust the government that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin. It's in the code. I think a lot of people might, over time, gradually think that's a better form of money.
So you say if enough people use Bitcoin, it could help bring down the dollar. You think that's a real possibility?
Well, I think it's a little bit the other way. When the dollar's in trouble, which it will get in trouble, that will be one of the alternatives. And I guess it'll be a play on it. And the more Bitcoins are used, the worse it will be for the dollar. But something has to happen to the dollar.
A bubble. Sooner or later, that bubble will burst.
Why should people trust you?
They don't have to, because the Bitcoin is an open and free system. They don't have to trust us. They just need to trust the system.
Who do you trust with Bitcoin?
Nobody. That's the point. Bitcoin's a bank in cyberspace run by software, incorruptible software.
And if that works, we're all served and we're all happy.
El Salvadorians now hold in their hands the keys to their own financial destiny, unshackled from the oppressive machines of traditional finance. In this land, Bitcoin isn't merely a currency. It's a sacred tool for securing private property rights, ensuring that every citizen can build, save, and thrive without fear of government overreach. Number 4, economic reform and debt management. Bukele announced that El Salvador would present its first debt-free budget by 2025, indicating there would be no more borrowing for current expenses. His term had seen efforts towards economic stability, with significant private investments in logistic corridors and a focus on tourism growth. Additionally, his administration had worked on reducing government deficits and managing public debt.
America prints money to buy its own debt because nobody else in the world wants to buy American debt. It's called debt monetization. In fact, 50 years ago, people in the U.S. would look at Central America and say, ha ha, you have to buy your own debt. You're a banana republic. And so here you have the president of El Salvador lecturing people in Washington at CPAC about you guys are now monetizing your own debt.
Government is financed by treasury bonds. And who buys the treasury bonds? Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed? The treasury bonds themselves. So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air.
By the way, the balance sheet of El Salvador, the country, has hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in Bitcoin. They're putting Bitcoin on their reserves, which helps them grow outside of all this fiat money madness. So not only do they use it as day-to-day legal tender, but the country itself has put Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
Number 5, infrastructure and public projects. Investments in infrastructure have been noticeable, including rebuilding highways, constructing new facilities like libraries and animal hospitals, and hosting international events like the Miss Universe pageant. These projects aimed at improving the country's image and enhancing public services. I can personally speak to this. When you're driving through El Salvador, you cannot help but be captivated by the nature and its beauty of all the landscape in El Salvador, from the lush rolling hills to the stunning Pacific coastlines. However, it's not just the scenic vistas that catch your eye. The country is undergoing a remarkable transformation under President Bukele's administration. The roads, once a patchwork of potholes and neglect, are now smooth, well-maintained highways that facilitate a seamless journey through the vibrant nation. New bridges and overpasses are sprouting up, enhancing connectivity and showcasing a commitment to modern infrastructure. The development is palpable, with each milestone revealing new public work projects, from revitalizing urban centers to expensive public spaces, all contributing to a sense of progress and optimism for El Salvador's future.
And even the 70,000 people who are incarcerated in that country are not just seeing their lives wasted away. President Bukele has instituted a zero leisure policy where they are now restoring buildings and murals and actually rebuilding the country that so many of them had a hand in ravaging through gang warfare.
They have a lot of things to fix. They have a lot of things to build. Like, for example, the new international airport they are building. They say it's going to be the airport of the Pacific. Countries from all over the world will fly into El Salvador in the next couple of years.
And because of that, he's inspired his country with a very service mentality, a very law-abiding mentality.
And every one of these accomplishments is a true testament to Bukele's divine will, the mission that he has been sent upon by God to save El Salvador.
18% of the GDP in El Salvador right now is construction. So that country's going to be like the Singapore of the Western Hemisphere.
Let me tell you, El Salvador is the next Singapore. And the GDP here is going to triple in the next 5, 6, 7 years. This is the place to be, Jimmy.
And this is why I say that El Salvador is the greatest investment opportunity of our lifetime. And this is why I'm planning to move my production company to El Salvador. And I plan to build out the largest media company in El Salvador. I want my children to grow up in a country that will be the bastion for freedom for generations to come, a true Christian nation. On a side note, I'm also partnering with one of my employees who lives in El Salvador to start a real estate company. Chances are by the time that you see this film, our real estate company will be up and running. If you are interested or looking for real estate, please send me a DM on X at Ryan Matta Media or at shotsbymatta_, just in case my main account gets deplatformed.
This is it, guys. This is Bitcoin Beach. So watch how beautiful this place is when you come out here. Is this not absolutely stunning? Wow. Birds flying everywhere. The size of those waves are, like 6, 8 feet. Little kids out there just ripping. And all of this real estate here, folks, some of the most beautiful real estate in the entire country is right here on Bitcoin Beach. Let's take a walk, shall we?
Bitcoin Beach.
Bitcoin Beach.
Bitcoin Beach.
Bitcoin Beach.
Bitcoin Beach.
It's Bitcoin. El Bitcoin.
It's Bitcoin, 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 right? It's one of the first places in the world you can use the cryptocurrency Bitcoin to pay for just about anything. Mike Peterson is the man who started the Bitcoin Beach initiative.
The goal was circular economy with Bitcoin, and everybody said we couldn't do it, but you guys are here and you see the result.
You played a significant role into that. What was it like watching the citizens here adopt Bitcoin, and was the resistance at first, and have they all come around to it? It seems like almost every business over here on Bitcoin Beach, or a majority of them now, are accepting Bitcoin, and they're happy to do so, and they enjoy it, and it seems like their business is thriving because of it.
Definitely there was, resistance at first, because it's like you have somebody come in and tell you that you're going to start using magic internet money. And, of course, they're like, oh, this guy's a scammer. We're going to get, somehow screwed out of this whole deal, which is what they should think. I mean, you do need to be able to dive in and understand it. And I always tell people, yes, it's great to be skeptical. We started working with the kids initially, and we saw just, the kids, for them, it was second nature. They're used to doing things on their phone. And then when COVID hit and everything kind of shut down here, it really kind of supercharged everything, because we were able to distribute funds to, let's say, probably 90% of the families in El Zonte. And we're in the past, in general, we're hesitant to do that. We don't like giving people things for free because it creates dependency. It can distort the local economy. It can have all these kind of second and third order impacts that a lot of times are negative. And so, but during COVID, it was kind of different. People couldn't work. So we weren't discouraging them from work by giving them Bitcoin. They were going hungry, the stores were going out of business, and so it was kind of a lifeline for the community. And so it also took a lot of time on their hands so they could do their own research, they could understand what Bitcoin was. And so that's kind of how you saw it take off. And I would say, even to this point, there's still a lot of, the local businesses, and I've heard comments from different things like, yeah, Bitcoin's helped a little, but we already had a lot of tourism, and it's really the surfing. Bitcoin is like not consequential in this. And it was just funny because I see the people coming into town, and I see what it was like before and it is now. And I think a lot of them don't realize that it's not just the Bitcoiners, which there's a significant number, but it's the fact that the media put El Zonte on the map for the first time. People all around the world know about it. Even the negative articles, the hit pieces that are done, show the pictures of the beautiful beaches and all this stuff. So you have all these people, tourists that are coming in that aren't necessarily Bitcoiners, but they saw it on 60 Minutes, or they saw it in an article in Forbes, or all these different things. And so it's had a huge impact, but I think a lot of people can't pull back enough to realize that.
And how would you say that the response has been? I don't know how it was before, but I've come to El Salvador now 3 times in the last 90 days. And the second I walk off that plane, I'm greeted with smiles from the person that's serving me at Wendy's. Feels like they couldn't be more proud to be working at Wendy's, the guy that's pumping my gas. The citizens are so happy here. It seems like everybody I meet is, even the people that are selling new coconuts on the side of the road, they're so happy to see. I don't know, maybe it's I'm a foreigner, but have you noticed that shift in like the overall atmosphere here in El Salvador since Bukele's done what he's done?
The kind of remarkable thing is the people here have always been super friendly, even when things were horrible, even when their outlook on the future was like, yeah, there's no future here, we need to get out. They were still very friendly and helpful, but they had this sense of despair at the same time, where now people have this sense of like hope and like there's a future here. And so I think you're kind of picking up the synergy of those two things coming together. A generally friendly population, but now with hope for the first time.
And we see it reflected in the faces of the people who are optimistic and happy. That's all due to the combination of Bitcoin plus Bukele, who is a Renaissance man, a once in 500-year leader. And the results are palpable. The results are obvious.
And so why wouldn't the United States and NATO just say that the people in El Salvador need some democracy and then overthrow their government, which is what we always do? Why wouldn't we overthrow this new president and then install a puppet, get rid of crypto, and then everything's back to normal?
El Salvador is solving a big problem for America on the southern border.
The number of people crossing the southern border from El Salvador dropped 36%. It's on track to drop even further this year.
In recent months, we've seen, it has to be said, a change, it seems, from the Biden administration in terms of how they handle Bukele, in part because they need him on immigration, and also in part because it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere.
You also met with migrants, but not the kind that Americans think of. You're talking about people who left the United States and crossed the border to go south to El Salvador.
You're right, this is the other direction we're talking about. People who left El Salvador years ago and who are now going back.
And the fact that they're coming back is the biggest proof that we're doing things the right way. We have a long way to go, but we're doing things the right way.
This can't be the same country. There's no way, because I don't see that. I feel super safe.
Bukele's legacy in El Salvador is a beacon for all leaders, a reminder that with vision, courage, and the unyielding commitment to the welfare of your people, you can indeed change the world.
We are already seeing these symptoms in the United States. Big cities in decline, like Baltimore, Portland, New York, just to name a few.
The crime issue is really serious.
It's never been more clear in America that we are in a crime crisis.
Places where crime and drugs have become the daily norm, and even accepted and promoted by the government.
There's an issue going on right now in Austin where they have this progressive, Soros-funded DA who's just letting everybody out of jail. What'd you do? Rape people? Let them out of jail. Murder someone? Let them out of jail.
How many young people have you lost to the streets of Philadelphia or San Francisco, to fentanyl? Did we see these apocalyptic sights 15, 10, 5 years ago? Can you imagine how it will be in the next 5, 10, or 15 years?
Why is it that American streets are more dangerous than ever, but we look to the third world for safety and for prosperity?
In our country, these values had been degraded. Other nations had those values. That's why those other nations became great.
And to come from a place like El Salvador, where just 5 years ago, no person would even consider walking the streets, to now seeing a place that is flourishing.
They kept it very simple. You want to fight crime, lock up the criminals. You want to build a great nation? Put God first.
It actually gives me hope that the American people, we have the right values, we have the right culture, we have the right direction. It's just that our leaders are so captured by the corruption that we allow our life to be diminished, and it does not have to be that way.
And that is my message to you. Put up the fight, because in the end, it will be worth it, and you will have your country back.
You said the first point of my plan is seek God's wisdom.
Yes.
That is what you said.
Yeah, I said that, yeah.
It's a prerequisite for wise decision making,
yes,
I would say.
Exactly. So that's the first part of our plan.
As we draw this journey to a close, remember this. President Bukele stands not just as a leader, but as a warrior appointed by the divine to spearhead this sacred battle for the soul of Christianity. In the shadows of the words of Jesus Christ, "My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." Bukele's actions resonate with a clear message, a denouncement of the wicked who infiltrate the sanctity of our faith. Through his embrace of Bitcoin, Bukele has cast a bright, unyielding light on the dark, shadowy schemes of the bankers who, from their ivory towers, have declared war not just on Christianity, but on God's children everywhere. They have woven a web of financial oppression, aiming to control, to manipulate, and to drain the very essence of our spiritual and moral existence. But here in this moment, we see the dawn of a new era, an era where the power is restored to the people, where the faith is not just a belief, but a rally cry, where the silver bullet of Bitcoin disrupts the chains of the old world order. Bukele's mission is clear. His resolve is unbreakable. His fight is just not for himself, but for us, for our freedom, and for our salvation. So let this documentary be more than just a record of history. Let it be a beacon of hope, a call to arms for all those who believe. Let us stand with Bukele in this holy war to reclaim what is rightfully ours, our faith, our freedom, our future. For in this struggle, we are not alone. We are guided by the hands of God, blessed by His will, and armed with the truth. Together, let us rise, let us pray, let us fight, for our house, our faith, shall once again be a sanctuary, not a den of thieves. This is more than just a documentary. It's a testament to the divine mission, to a leader chosen by God to save Christianity from the brink of extinction. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I don't know if you noticed, but her braces are donated by friends of mine too.
Really?
You're making no one leaves here without a beautiful smile.
Ah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you not just to share a story, but to ignite a spark of compassion, a flame of action in each of our hearts. I want to talk about men like Bob McDonnell, an American patriot whose heart beats for humanity beyond borders. Bob McDonnell, a man whose life's mission has led him to the streets of El Salvador, not for personal gains, but to combat one of the darkest trades on earth, human trafficking. In my travels across this vast country, investigating the grim realities of child trafficking, I have witnessed the despair and the hope, the darkness and the light. Amidst the many organizations I've encountered, there is one that stands out, a beacon of true safety and rehabilitation, Mikasa Kids, led by Bob McDonnell. His organization, the House of Life, is not just about rescue, it's about transformation. Bob's mission goes way beyond rescue. He provides a sanctuary for those who have suffered the unimaginable. Women and children who are not only trafficked, but often violated by those who they should have trusted the most, their family and relatives. These survivors, all of whom have become pregnant through such horrendous acts, find not just temporary shelter at Bob's facility, but a home where they can nurture and raise their children. The transformations I witnessed in these young mothers and these children is nothing short of miraculous. The joy and happiness on the faces of these children, who knew nothing but fear and pain, is a testament to the healing power of the love and security provided by Bob's organization. Knowing where these children came from versus where they are after spending just 1 year under Bob's care, it's a fucking miracle. What this man has done for these children, I've never seen anything like it. If you guys could just skip 1 cup of coffee, this is where you send your money. This guy's truly saving lives. Oh, yeah, is there anything that she would like to tell me, or anything that she feels is important that other people know?
Que es muy bonito y es un lugar muy especial para las madres que aquí pueden tener muchas oportunidades.
That here is a very special place, and it's a very good place, and it's a place where young mothers can have a lot of opportunities.
Now imagine for a moment, if you will, the life of these children. Picture their fear, their pain, and their desperate need for salvation. Now consider that, with a donation as modest as the cost of your daily coffee, you could be part of their rescue. For every $30,000 donated, the House of Life can prevent 12,000 individuals from enduring the horrors of rape and abuse. Let that sink in. Your small act of kindness can literally save thousands from a lifetime of trauma.
Between the ages of 12 and 17 years old in New York City, this little girl was raped. We guess about 60,000 times before she was finally set free. And that's the fate of thousands of children.
I was ignorant. So the fastest growing enterprise in the world is child sex trafficking.
Fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world is the selling of people.
In a world often overshadowed by individual pursuit and self-interest, here stands Bob McDonnell, a testament to what one person's resolve can achieve. His work isn't about borders or nationalities. It's about the universal language of human kindness and justice. He's not just saving lives, he's restoring hope and dignity where there was absolutely none. I ask you today, with the warmth of your morning coffee in your hands, to consider the power of a simple donation. If you could, skip just one cup of coffee, or perhaps a few. Imagine the difference that money could make when pooled together. It's not just about the money, it's about what that money represents, our collective empathy, or commitment to humanity. Each one of us has the power to change the narrative for somebody else. Every dollar you donate is a step towards breaking the chains of human trafficking. It's an investment in a future where every child can grow up free and where every woman can walk without fear. Let's honor the spirit of men like Bob McDonnell by joining his mission. Let's make a concise choice to part with small luxury, knowing fully well that our sacrifice can lead to somebody else's salvation. Together, let's build a house of life in every corner of the world where darkness lurks, turning it into light. Thank you. And may we all find the courage to act, the heart to care, and the willingness to give. Remember, it's not just about money, it's about making a difference, one cup of coffee at a time. Together, we can change the world. If you'd like to learn more about Bob's organization, please watch the full interview. It'll be linked down in the description, or it'll be posted in the comments as well. Bob is truly a hero. Words can't describe what I saw. I've been to a lot of these facilities that claim that they actually care for children, and you see how the children are treated in these facilities here in America. The look on these girls' faces when I walked in and I was with Bob, and seeing them laugh and smile and joke, and the love they have for Bob. He's became the father figure that every one of these women, Bob's became the father figure that every one of these children wish they had. Bob is the father that every one of us wish we had as well. I've never found one in this entire time of doing this, one organization that I could tell you, America, that yes, if you donate here, your money will directly go to saving children. And I'll do one further. I'm gonna be down in El Salvador quite often. So I'll show you where your money's going. Please consider watching the videos down below in the description. This man's really saving lives. The QR code you are looking at here on the screen is Bob's PayPal. Bob also has Venmo, and he also has donation links directly on his website. We have got him set up so no matter how you'd like to donate, he can accept your donations. PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, and I believe a GiveSendGo. All of which will be right down below in the description. $5, guys. This isn't America. Bob doesn't need hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. He needs $30,000 to bring in another 6 girls off the street. He already has the girls waiting. He just needs to secure the funding. I promised him that we would do it. So help me. Help Bob, help me raise this $30,000. And I'll give you a front row seat so you can hear directly from the kids. Could you imagine getting raped by your father, your uncle, your brother? Could you imagine getting raped by your cousin and then going to your grandma at 6 just to have your grandma beat you bloody and tell you that it was your fault because you wore shorts? That is the trauma that these girls have been through. That's one of their stories. and the joy that I've seen on these girls' faces, I'll show you. God bless you guys.
When I talk to my conservative friends right here, they always tell me that the problem is high taxes, but they're wrong. The real problem is that you pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper. Sooner or later, that bubble will burst. There's still time. You don't have to make the same mistakes we did in the 60s and the 70s. Winning the election isn't enough to solve these problems. It would take a total re-engineering of the government, top to bottom. It would be hard. The system will push back. But you have the right to determine your own fate.